Last episode, the flowering cycle ran its course. Every plant faced the same pressure. Heat, cold nights, light disruption, limited intervention. Nothing was protected. Nothing was rushed. Every response was logged. Every deviation recorded. By the end, differences were taking shape. Some adapted. Some struggled. All of them told the truth. At the same time, the male entered flower in isolation. Clean expression. No conflicting signals. Now pollen is beginning to drop. But that's not his conclusion. It's only one piece of the puzzle. Now, we move into harvest. This is not a production run. It's a selection run. From here on out, observation turns into consequence. Harvest Day. Day 65 of flower. At this point, the work shifts from observation to preservation. Because of the winter season and the trellis, I'm cutting these plants down branch by branch instead of hanging them whole. In warmer months, I'll hang whole plants to slow the dry as much as possible. Right now, this gives me more control. As each plant comes down, every branch gets handled individually, hung on its own hanger, and labeled by pheno number for accuracy. Once the plant is cut, there's no room for confusion later. Everything has to stay traceable. My goal is always the same: a slow, cold dry that stays as close to 60 degrees and 60% humidity as possible. That window matters. Dry too fast, and you lose terpenes. Aromas flatten. Flavor disappears. And anything you evaluate later is already compromised. You can run a perfect grow and still ruin the entire result right here. That's why terpene and flavor preservation matter more than anything else at this stage. If the dry is off, the data is corrupted before it ever reaches the jar. I only remove the large fan leaves here. Everything else stays on. The more plant material you remove, the faster it dries. Breaking it down too early works against what I'm trying to preserve. Once everything is cut and prepared, the environment matters just as much as the plants. Before these flowers go up to dry, the tent gets cleaned, vacuumed, wiped down, and set for drying. Drying isn't a separate step. It's part of the evaluation. There's nothing wrong with letting flowers cure in jars over time. Potency can continue to rise, and some profiles mature beautifully. I just don't want overly wet flowers sealed in jars that need constant burping to recover from a rushed dry. My preference is to finish the dry properly, so the flowers are already stable when they hit the jars. Not every plant holds its terpenes over time. Some fade, even when everything was done right. What I'm looking for are the ones that don't. The plants where weeks later, every time the jar opens, the aroma still fluctuates, still evolves, and stays alive. That's not guaranteed. That's selected for. The male is finally dropping pollen. This is the moment a lot of people stop watching. As soon as pollen shows up, the job feels finished. Collection happens. The male gets tossed. Decision made. In this system, that's too early. Pollen release is not the finish line. It's one data point. Before I collect anything, every tool gets cleaned, sanitized, and fully dried. Clean to prevent contamination, dry because moisture kills pollen instantly. If there's moisture anywhere in this process, viability is gone. So nothing moves forward until that's locked in. I lay down brand new parchment paper on a tray and place it under a 150 micron screen. New parchment only. Clean surface, non-stick. Easy collection once the pollen dries. Before the plant comes out, all airflow gets shut down. No circulation fans, no exhaust. Any air movement means lost pollen and unnecessary contamination. I want everything falling exactly where it should. I move the male slowly onto the table. No rushing, no shaking. I start by cutting a few branches and gently shaking them over the screen. That gives me controlled release without dumping plant material into the pollen. Cutting branches also applies light stress to the male. I want to see how he behaves after pollen release, not just before it. After that, I carefully shake the whole plant to collect what's left. I use a 150 to 200 micron screen on purpose. Anything larger lets plant debris through, and plant matter holds moisture. If moisture mixes with pollen, it clumps, degrades, and won't store properly. Clean separation matters here. Once collection is done, the pollen sits out to dry for 48 to 72 hours. That's all it needs. Longer isn't better. Leaving pollen out too long reduces viability. When it's fully dry, I collect it into vials and label everything clearly. Strain name, pheno number, collection date. No guessing later. The vials go into sealed containers with desiccant packs to absorb any remaining moisture, and then straight into the freezer for long-term storage. At that point, collection is done, but evaluation isn't. In my system, the male doesn't get discarded after pollen drops. He finishes his entire flowering cycle, just like a female. I've seen it too many times. Males that look clean early, strong expression, no red flags at first. Then later in flower, things change. Late intersex expression, breakdown under stress, traits you never see if the plant gets cut too early. If you stop observing when pollen drops, you miss that information. And once it's missed, it gets passed forward. So the male stays. Same expectations as females, same level of scrutiny. That's how guesswork gets removed. That's how decisions start carrying weight. This isn't about speed. It's about certainty. And that's the difference between collecting pollen and selecting a male. 8 females made it to harvest. Identical environment. Identical inputs. Identical stress. This is where most people stop. They show you buds. They show you jars. They show you the highlight reel. But this is a selection run. The plant is the data, not just the flower. I evaluate every pheno using the same criteria. Stress response, structural integrity, flower execution, final effect. Then it gets a score. No bias, no hype, only what the data supports. Before these plants went into flower, they were all transplanted into autopots. What followed was a short, low input window. No corrections, no intervention. I let it run as a constraint. It exposed nutrient handling and recovery differences before flower. That window comes up because it showed how each plant responded when inputs were reduced. After the flowers finished drying, I evaluated them one at a time. 1 pheno per day, 8 days in a row. That kept each effect isolated. What follows reflects each profile on its own. Pheno number 17 was one of 4 plants affected during the low input period. It yellowed. It started to lock out, but it rebuilt quickly. It returned to active green growth before the other affected plants. That indicates root resilience. Structurally, it was one of the strongest plants in the room. One of the thickest stalks. High vascular capacity. Strong lateral branching that held weight through flower. The frame stayed upright without support. In flower, it finished clean. 86.5 grams, just over 3 ounces. Solid lowers, minimal larf, and uniform flower development across the canopy. Resin production was high. One of the frostiest plants in the run. Trichomes were sandy. That texture is often associated with extract suitability. Terpenes held and fluctuated over time in the jar. Gassy caramel, lemon, and eucalyptus. 1 seed was found during the trim. That indicates a small pollen event under stress. There were no signs of intersex during the grow or during trimming. Under pressure, it remained stable. On the clone side, it was clean. 5 cuts taken, 100% success, roots in 8 to 9 days. The effect is heavy, very potent, strong body effect. No anxiety, no paranoia. Within 15 minutes, it causes full physical shutdown. It also eliminated the aches and pains I was feeling. That kind of relief is not subtle. Munchies hit immediately. Not a bad thing, just something to note. This is a medicinal profile. Keeper score, 9 out of 10. Pheno number 9 was also affected during the neglect window. It stalled. Internodes did not extend. Lateral growth remained suppressed. The frame never rebuilt. In flower, it stabilized but stayed small. Bud sites remained underdeveloped. High larva production, low harvestable flower mass. It finished at 53.65 grams, lowest yield in the tent. The branches were thin and spindly, structurally weak, and difficult to support. It was a nightmare to trim. Resin coverage was moderate. Terpenes leaned toward the God's Garden side of the lineage. Forbidden fruit influence. After recovery from the neglect window, it held nutritionally through flower. On stability, it passed. No intersex expression and no seeds. The effect is lighter, euphoric, and uplifting. No anxiety, no agitation. It increases sociability and mood. It is pleasant, but it is not elite. It lacks therapeutic depth and weight. This is a stable plant with weak production and weak structure. Keeper score, 3 out of 10. Pheno number 8 remained nutritionally stable through the entire run. No deficiency, no chlorosis, no low input stress response. Structurally, it was one of the strongest plants in the room. Best lateral growth, one of the thickest stalks, high mechanical stability. In flower, the limitation appeared. The top buds were dense. The upper canopy held. The mid and lower canopy broke down. The bottom 50 to 60% of the plant produced lighter flowers. High larf, high trim labor. The flowers were frosty, purple, and God's Garden leading. Terpenes leaned toward the forbidden fruit side of the lineage. Fruity, lemon, and creamy. It finished at 82.51 grams. The yield came from the structure, not density. On the clone side, it was clean. 5 cuts taken, 100% success, roots in 8 to 9 days. The effect is similar to pheno number 9. Uplifting, clear, light body buzz, but more intense. Increased focus, increased creativity, no anxiety, and no agitation. This is a structurally strong plant with a flower profile that breaks down below the top canopy. It is not a line builder. Keeper score, 7.5 out of 10. Pheno number 16 was one of the more nutritionally sensitive plants in the room. During the low input window, it began to lock out. Mid and lower leaves yellowed. Brown spotting appeared. That indicates compromised nutrient uptake under reduced support. After supercropping, it rebounded. That points to mechanical resilience, not nutritional robustness. In flower, it stretched aggressively. Tallest plant in the tent. Bud size remained small. Resin production was high. One of the frostiest plants in the room. The flowers were greasy and sticky, not sandy. Terpenes leaned toward the cookies and GMO side of the Donny Burger lineage. Chem, garlic, gas, menthol. It finished at 76.76 grams, exactly average for the run. Bag appeal was high. The flowers were visually striking, but the plant itself was weak. Nutrient sensitive, structurally unstable. It stretched and attempted to dominate the canopy. The effect is heavy, very potent, strong couch lock. It produces a numb, spaced out effect. Not anxious, not negative, but not deeply therapeutic. This is a visually unique plant with limited resilience and average production. Keeper score, 6 out of 10. Pheno number 13 had the weakest structure in the run. Thinnest stalk, low mechanical strength, weak lateral branching. It also showed stress during the low input window. Structurally, it never returned to baseline. In flower, it expressed visually unique traits. Heavy frost, deep black fade, high bag appeal. Bud density was deceptive. They looked dense on the plant, they dried light. Not airy, low mass. It finished at 73.03 grams, slightly below average. Terpene expression leaned gelato, separating it as an outlier from the rest of the lineup. Creamy, rainbow sherbet, light gas. The effect is heavy. Strong sedation, strong body effect. No anxiety, no agitation. Rapid onset of hunger. 2 seeds were found during the trim. No nanners, no male parts. That points to a pollen event, not sexual instability. Structurally, this plant does not meet foundation standards. From a medicinal and cosmetic standpoint, it delivers. It sits in an uncomfortable middle ground. Keeper score. I'm not sure about this one yet. Pheno number 3 was one of the most vigorous plants in the room. It showed minimal response to the low input neglect window. It maintained nutrient uptake and growth. It had the thickest stalk, high biomass production. After harvest, something notable happened. Despite having no remaining foliage, it began pushing new vegetative shoots directly from the sides of the branches. That kind of spontaneous re-veg indicates extreme metabolic drive and hormonal momentum. The plant was still actively trying to grow. That level of vigor is rare. It finished at 91.57 grams, highest yield in the run. Resin production was high. The flowers were velvety with sandy trichomes. Terpenes were meaty, garlicky, chem, and sour. During the trim, reproductive instability was revealed. 1 nanner was found. 5 seeds were present. That was the sole pollen source for the tent. The nanner was hidden inside a mid-level flower behind the branch, which is why it was never visible during the grow. 1 isolated pollen release produced 8 seeds in the entire tent. There was no widespread intersex expression. and no population failure. The effect is a creeper. It does not hit immediately. After 15 to 20 minutes, it settles in. Strong sedation, strong body effect. It drowned out background noise, removed aches and pains, and locked me into the couch. This is potent medicine, but reproductive stability failed under pressure. Keeper score, 5.5 out of 10. Pheno number 4 showed strong early vigor, average stock, strong lateral branching. It handled the low input neglect window acceptably. It was also one of the 2 plants that required a taproot reversal at germination. After correction, it recovered immediately and grew without delay. In veg, it performed well. In flower, it broke down. It became one of the most nutritionally unstable plants in the tent. Downward leaf clawing, uncoordinated fade, and poor nutrient partitioning. Flower development suffered. Small buds, high larf. It finished at 64.66 grams, second lowest yield in the tent. Terpene expression showed influence from both parents. Musky, nutty, earthy, and fruity. In appearance, it leaned heavily toward the God's Garden side of the lineage. After jarring, the aroma faded. Terpene retention was poor. The effect was uplifting, sociable with a light body buzz, similar to pheno number 9. No intersex, no seeds. This was a veg performer that failed in flower. It produced attractive resin, but not usable yield. Keeper score, 4 out of 10. Pheno number 11 was structurally balanced. It showed minimal response to the low input neglect window. It maintained stable growth, slightly above average stalk, strong lateral branching, and tight node spacing. Bud development was uniform. It finished at 85.56 grams, third highest yield in the tent. Resin production was average for the room. The flowers were purple and God's Garden leaning. Terpene expression carried both parents. Fruity, musky, nutty, lemony, and menthol. Terpenes held in the jar with a slight fade over the first 1 to 2 weeks. No intersex expression during the grow or the trim. The effect is balanced. It works in the daytime or in the evening. It supports focus and motivation, and also provides a calming body effect. This is a versatile profile. Keeper score, 8.5 out of 10. Pheno number 17 and pheno number 11 represent what this system is designed to find. Balanced structure, stable growth, usable yield, and an effect that works without trade-offs. Nothing extreme and nothing fragile. Just plants that hold together. And with that baseline established, there's one plant I intentionally didn't finalize earlier. This is the plant most people would keep. It looks elite, it hits hard, and on the surface, it checks the boxes people tend to prioritize first. This is where breeding splits into two paths. One path prioritizes visual appeal and effects first, and tries to correct structure and stability later. The other path builds the foundation first, and allows standout traits to emerge inside stable generations. My system chooses the foundation. Keeper score, 5 out of 10. These scores aren't opinions, they're filters. This is where selection stops being theoretical. What moves forward isn't what impressed at first glance. It's what remained functional under pressure. Everything else gets eliminated. This is how a line gets built. I ran this male to the end of his natural flowering cycle. He didn't dump pollen once and burn out. He started shedding early, stayed consistent, and never stalled. What matters here isn't how much pollen dropped in a moment. It's that his reproductive program stayed intact over the entire flowering cycle. That tells me this plant didn't panic under prolonged flowering pressure. This doesn't guarantee anything in the offspring, but it does tell me the signal being passed forward is stable. And that is why males don't get cut early in this system. That's how weak transmission gets filtered out. But nothing gets crowned from a single run.